tie 50-50. Those are the only paper ballots that remain in our election. And so the electronic results were the 2-to-1, okay, 33% and 33%. So we said there's a problem there. One thing that Travis County couldn't produce were the actual ballot images. That's what the state law says, is for these electronic voting systems, they wanted two pathways. They wanted a data pathway, and they wanted a ballot image verification of this. And apparently Travis County has never been able to keep these ballot images, which is a problem across the state.
Wow.
We're not the only election that has found this. We're the first ones to file an election contest, a court case over this, that the Travis County and also the Secretary of State is not adhering to the state law.
Right. And so
that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just Austin, statewide, and I'm sure we're seeing this nationally as well. So much evidence of vote flipping, people actually taking their phones into the booth and taking pictures, a video of the votes actually flipping, and things like that, where we're seeing this again and again with this electronic voting. It has the opportunity there for some malfeasance.
That's right. And, you know, my background is software and in the semiconductor industry, and this is not hard to do. And so I think, you know, what I really was impressed with was the legislature. The Texas legislature had a strategy to deal with this. They wanted a data structure, which is kind of very simple to manipulate and tamper with, but they wanted a backup, which is this ballot image statute that's on the books. That came into play in 1997. And so apparently the Secretary of State and these counties in Texas have not been adhering to this. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know. You know, we walked in, we're expecting them to follow the law, mm-hmm. and that's not what occurred. So we filed a contest, an election contest, and we presented our evidence. The judge let us get some discovery from the county, and we got some really interesting data out of the Travis County voting system. And one of the things we got where we found where there were systematic corrupt mobile ballot box errors that were occurring on election night when the votes were being entered and tabulated. This is a big issue.
So it wasn't, I mean, you were seeing it sort of systematically. So it wasn't as if one station was just someone made a mistake here or there.
No, it was occurring at the very beginning before votes were being added into the system. You know, you had this corruption error and votes were being added. You had a corruption error, the votes were being added, and this occurred 9 different times throughout election night.
Wow.
That is a problem. What was going on? What causes corruption? Was it one electronic mobile ballot box that had a corruption, or was it 9 of them?
Right.
Was it being used repetitive? So we asked the judge, can we please get to the software and look at why this thing was corrupted? The judge told us no, we couldn't get to it. And we also said, well, can we take the deposition of the county employee that was entering this? No, you cannot go get the deposition of the person who was using this. That's not good, because we needed that evidence.
Yeah.
So we went to court and we had a hearing, and the judge threw our case out because we had no evidence, where he wasn't allowing us to get a little deeper into finding out what happened.
I mean, aside just from these plot points and everything, you also have printouts that the city gave you, probably not thinking that you would even understand what you were looking at there. It just looks like a bunch of numbers, but you're actually able to tabulate there where you could see that software was malfunctioning at a certain point in time.
That's right.
9 different stations.
That's right.
And the New York Times actually reported that this was one of the big issues with e-voting, is that software could be used to corrupt the votes. And I mean, that's New York Times right there. So this isn't as if, some, conspiracy theory that you're thinking perhaps someone may have corrupted the software. It's a legit question. It's a legit concern.
It's a very, very good question. And, we got really close, and we wanted to see what was causing this mobile ballot box. What these mobile ballot boxes are, they are memory cards that are used at each of the polling locations where all the votes are stored. Mm-hmm. So when that's corrupted, that throws up another flag. That's a big issue. And then there's a third kind of backup set of data that is used, election record that is used for elections. When you go vote, you'll have election judges at your polling location. And after the polls close, the election judges are instructed by the Secretary of State of Texas to print what they call backup tapes, results tally tapes. So those results tapes have candidates' names and the number of votes that they received at that location, and they're to take those and put those in envelopes. Judges sign them, take them home in case there's, a fire or some disaster that occurs. These are very important election record tapes. Those backup tapes the judges were instructed to not print those.
Wow.
And
it was actually written on
the judges' envelopes.
Do not print.
Yeah.
And that's this is constitutional.
This is required. The election judges are supposed to print the tally tapes. It's the third record, the third backup, in case you don't have ballot images, in case, the memory cards are corrupted. You go to these tally tapes and they don't exist. They were instructed not to print them. And so here we have a bunch of issues, a bunch of irregularities, more ballots than we have names. We have, mathematical patterns. We've got corrupt electronic memory cards. We have election records that are missing, and the judge threw our case out. And so that's, we are considering an appeal, and the judge did make some good comments during the hearing. And, he said, we're going to do this as a no evidence summary judgment, which will make it clean for an appeal. So we're in the process of making that decision. It's expensive, and so we're asking for help from, all across the state of Texas. This is affecting all of us. We've had candidates call us in Tarrant County, Harris County, and Dallas County and say they've asked about these ballot images. No one will print them. They can't print them. And we're the first candidate to bring this. This is a case of first impression across the state.
Wow. Yeah, so unprecedented. So what do you want to say to people who are just, say you're being a sore loser and to just get over it?
Well, and our elections are the most important thing that we do in our country. And if we don't do this right, we don't hold our election officers accountable, we get the elections and people representing us who we deserve, because we're here. We have to hold people accountable and make sure they do it right, and that the people's people are the ones up there representing us. There's nothing more important. And you think about this, elections have to be verifiable and accurate. And if they're not, that's the root cause of a lot of problems. Your taxes, your laws, your police, all of these things are really dictated by the people that we represent, that we vote for and want as representatives. And there's one more thing I think that's interesting about our race. These, and I want to show this. I don't think we did. Let's show the ballot image, the ballot and the cast vote record that the county is saying is a ballot. When we did our recount, what the county said they could not produce these ballot images, right? These ballot images. So what they did produce was what they call a cast vote record, which is basically a template. It's a printout to a template. It's a printout from the data structure file that they have to a template. So whatever they counted on election night, they're printing to a single piece of paper one by one, which is not a ballot image, okay? So the cast vote record, if we'll show it one more time, you can see on there it's a little bit small, but this cast vote record is not a official ballot. And in Texas, you count and you run elections by official ballot. So it doesn't have the date of the election on it. It doesn't have the name of the election. It doesn't have instructions. It doesn't have the voting squares, what a normal ballot looks like, which is on the left there.
And most importantly, the sequential serial number.
Yes, ma'am. That is exactly right. So the Texas Constitution requires that there's a sequential serial number on every ballot, so that we just don't vote on any old piece of paper, right? We vote on an official ballot. That's missing. So these cast vote records that the county produced for us to count are not ballots. And so that's the really crux of our lawsuit. Holding the county to the state law and asking the Secretary of State to hold all counties across the state to the state law. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is a big deal.
Yeah. It's not about winning that seat. This is much bigger than that. It's about transparency. You can't have democracy without transparency. So tell the audience where they can go to help support you in this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us on here and talking about this really, really critical issue. So we're considering filing an appeal. No candidate in the state of Texas has ever filed an appeal based on tabulation errors of electronic voting machines, and that the state required documents and records of the election were not retained. These ballot images and also these results tapes were not preserved. And so that's our case, and we're considering an appeal, and it's an expensive endeavor to do the right thing, and we're asking for everyone to please help with a donation and to our lawsuit. And you can look at us and check all our documents out at presleyfораustin.com. And that's our website. And so any donation of any size, $25 to $5,000, we are, no amount is too small or too large. So thank you.
Much appreciated. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Hopefully something will come of this, because we've got another big election year coming up. And
that's right.
It seems like every year people are bringing forward proof of some wrongdoings or mistakes or actual malfeasance with these e-voting machines. And every year they're kind of, judges are signing off on it, saying there's no evidence and look away and stop being a sore loser, things like that. And this is huge. You're absolutely right. The voting is one of the most important things that we do as a free society, and especially in our local elections where our votes really count. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the time.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, stick around, because after the break, a very special report from Alex Jones.
And finally tonight, here at INFOWARS Nightly News, I want to give you the story behind the story. Or as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. There's an article from Breitbart, and there's a lot of other publications breaking this down and going over it today, that President Obama is moving ahead with a push for basically carbon tax emissions on aircraft in this country. Now, we already have emission rules, but they want to basically regulate carbon dioxide that is put off. And by declaring that a toxic waste, they're able to tax it and able to shrink the size of engines. In fact, they're in the news now talking about commercial and also private aviation, the aircraft getting slower, things going in reverse, because we have to cut our carbon by 20% just in the next few years, and then by 50% in the next decade. We're talking about crippling industrial civilization and not having anything to replace it. But don't worry, government aircraft will be exempt from this, and President Obama has ordered the most massive new Air Force One in history, the biggest and the longest, and he personally just made that decision. Now, what's the rest of the story here? Well, everyone knows that for decades, insiders blew the whistle about NSA spying and bulk data collection. And the media spun it and said no such thing is happening. We also, for decades, heard that so many other government programs weren't taking place, and then later it would come out that they were taking place. There are countless examples of government and media working together to keep us in the dark. Until the early 1950s, we were told that there was no such thing as organized crime in this country. Everyone now knows that, of course, it was always going on, and not just Italian, but across the board. Everything from German to Irish to Jewish to Filipino, it's been going on. It's been happening. But this is part of the childlike state that they have tried to basically keep the population in for so long. Whether it's on the Patriot Act being used against citizens or illegal NSA spying. But the rest of the story here is weather modification. It has been well known since the 70s that Western governments, but also the Russians, could manipulate hurricanes, typhoons, could actually start hurricanes and typhoons. During Vietnam, Ben Livingston, the father of weather weapons, led squadrons in that would flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail. He could take a clear blue sky and turn it into huge thunderheads that would dump 2 feet of water in just a few hours.
My name is Ben Livingston. I'm the first person to ever see a cloud with the intention to cause it to do military damage. I know I can say that, and I did it several times before the next person did it.
Tell me what these clouds are we're looking at.
Well, these clouds were located up in the southern part of North Vietnam, and we needed to make rain down on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Highway 1. But there weren't any real clouds around. There were a number, this was the end of the monsoon season, but there were a number of these small clouds that barely reached the freezing level, and by putting a small amount of silver iodide in there, we got them to collect and start to build. And as they built, we just worked on the largest tower in the group until in just a very short time, We had
And then-
clouds that were